Hello, and welcome to my discussion on first-person shooter games. First-person shooters, also known as FPS games, are a type of genre where the video game is entirely based on gun and projectile weapon-based combat in a first-person perspective. This meaning that the entire game is played through the eyes of the protagonist. The example of first-person shooter I have chosen to discuss is Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Siege is a first-person shooter game developed by Ubisoft Montreal and then published by Ubisoft on December 1st of 2015. Rainbow Six Siege puts heavy emphasis on environmental damage and the communication of players a lot more than some of the other more specific FPS games, such as Call of Duty or Medal of Honor. Without further ado, let's discuss first-person shooters. FPS is a rather specific type of game genre, and all games in this genre come with their own sets of rules, aims, and objectives. However, if we were to broaden the term to just the genre shooters, there are a few more areas in which games have in common. For example, a common rule of all shooters would be all shooters consist of some form of combat with a gun or similar long-range or projectile weaponry. Some common aims and objectives of this type of genre would be to defeat the enemies built into the game and obviously to survive. But more specifically to FPS shooters and the game example I have chosen in specific, some common rules would be that the game can only be played in the first-person perspective. And considering Rainbow Six Siege is almost completely multiplayer or co-op based, an aim or objective would be to defeat the enemy team and survive. Rainbow Six Siege consists of two teams of 5 players facing off against each other with different types of objectives available, such as to defuse bombs, to rescue hostages from the enemy team and take them back to your base, and also to secure areas from the enemy team. Gameplay mechanics also play a big part in FPS games. A main gameplay mechanic of FPS games is gravity. It is impossible to create an FPS game without some form of gravity put into place. This is because, even if there isn't a lot of different layers to the game, there would still be the aspect of gravity involved that is keeping your avatar to the ground. Another core gameplay mechanic would be avatar-controlled protagonists. Take this for example, without an avatar-controlled protagonist, you wouldn't be able to play the game because you would not be able to control more than one player at the same time while also being in the first-person perspective. One more common gameplay mechanic of first-person shooters is the ability to hold multiple weapons at once. This gameplay mechanic is involved in many FPS games, but obviously not in all. The reason for this mechanic is to give the game depth and options for the players to be able to choose what they wish, giving the illusion of a more immersive experience. Another one of the main core features of an FPS game would be the use of health and armor. Health and armor play a vital part in FPS games. This is because without health and armor in place, the game would be completely pointless and boring, because there's no challenges or risks involved in playing the game because your avatar simply cannot die. The last gameplay mechanic found in most FPS games, but not as important as the previously discussed, is the implementation of resource management. This is done through the use of special equipment and also ammunition for weapons. These core mechanics are all put into place because an FPS game simply would not work without them. Some gameplay mechanics unique to only specific games, such as Rainbow Six Siege, are as follows. The peek mechanic, which allows you to lean your character to view around corners without exposing your entire player's avatar. This mechanic is getting used more and more throughout all new games and is a very useful mechanic for anybody playing the game. Another main mechanic of this game is that before the online matches begin, you get to choose from 10 different available operators. Both teams get 10 classes for attacking and 10 for defending. These classes come with their own special abilities and all have their different advantages and disadvantages. There is also no health regeneration involved in this game, and no respawns available, meaning where your avatar dies, you must either wait for your entire team to die or complete an objective, or for your entire team to kill all the enemy players to move on to the next round, where you are then respawned. The last mechanic I'm going to talk about would be the sound. Sound usually doesn't take a large place in the game mechanics of an FPS game, but with Rainbow Six Siege and also a few others, such as Counter-Strike Global Offensive, sound plays a large part. This is because the sound is how you can tell where your opposing members of your team are, such as an enemy running through a map or getting stuck in one of your team's special equipment. Challenge, risk and reward also play a large part of any game. The common challenges in FPS games are the enemies in the game and to try and survive if possible. There are also a few common risks implemented into FPS games, such as You usually must navigate your way through very well designed levels and also strategize what you plan to do to win the level. Some common rewards of FPS games are progression throughout the single player aspect of the game, and also in the form of valorization to rank up the online player's avatar. There are some specific challenges, risks, and rewards only seen in a select few FPS games. For example, in Rainbow Six Siege, some challenges would be in the situations area. This is where you are given an objective, and if you complete that objective while also meeting certain requirements specified by the mission, you get extra points. Another challenge of Rainbow Six Siege would be through the use of finding the objective before the round starts. This is through the use of the drones available to the enemy team before their players' characters spawn into the map. Some common risks in Siege would be to set up traps using special equipment outside of your initial spawn area, and to also search the map for enemy players. These risks also come with all their own rewards. For example, if you decide to leave the spawn area and go set up special equipment hidden in the map, this will give your team the advantage over the enemy team. This is because you can now damage, kill, or maybe even just spectate your enemies. Another reward to go with these risks is if you were to leave your spawn area to search for enemy players. This means that you can take out enemies before they even get close enough to spot the objective, again, giving your team the advantage over your enemies. The style of an FPS game is also extremely crucial to making the game function properly. The main styles you will find in any FPS game would be the first-person shooter perspective. As if it was third-person or an aerial view shooter, it would not come under the term first-person shooter. This also plays a part in which the game is made. FPS games must either be advanced 3D graphics or pseudo 3D graphics. The user interface plays a big part in the style of an FPS game. The user interface consists of the HUD, which is where all the ammo, health, and map are usually displayed. A good user interface is usually one of the common factors which decides whether a game is going to make it or break it. This is because if a feature like the HUD is too overcrowded or designed badly, then this could possibly damage the play experience for the customers. There are many different types of visual effects that also come with the FPS games, such as the effect where the player environment can be damaged and destroyed when grenades are thrown. FPS games usually give the effect of the grenade damaging the environment in some shape or form, even if it's just throughout the use of a smoke cloud to give the illusion of damage. The feedback of an FPS game is one of the most important forms of style. This is because feedback is seen throughout FPS games. For example, when the player damages an enemy, there is usually a sound placed to inform the player that he indeed hit his target. Or, when an objective has been completed, points usually show up on the screen, telling the player that they have indeed completed that objective. Some more common types of feedback seen in Rainbow Six Siege are round starts and round ends, when you destroy enemy equipment, and also when you kill an enemy or get an assist off one of your teammates. Most FPS games are strongly based on the narrative on the game, because it can give the player a more immersive experience in the storyline, as they feel they are the character because they are looking through the character's eyes. But in the example I have chosen, there isn't a lot of narrative in place. As you can see in the clip about to be played, the only example of a type of narrative involved in Rainbow Six Siege is through the use of situations. Situation missions are where the player is given certain tasks to play out against a selected few bots, and then there is almost little to none storyline involved. Whereas in most FPS games such as Battlefield, Call of Duty, and Medal of Honor, although they all have aspects of multiplayer, they are heavily focused on the narrative of their games to make the experience more immersive for their players.